Good afternoon, everyone. So now it's time to start our next panel discussion, which is named as 2021 Primer for Fraud Management. So to discuss this, we have an eminent panelist where we have Mr. Vinod Kumar, who is CEO from Subex, then Mr. Anuj Bansali, Head Trust and Safety. He is from PhonePe. And from the Vodafone, we have Vikram Kulkarni, Head of Corporate Security. And also, we have Munawar Ahmad, Fraud and Risk Management Consultant. So, to moderate this session, I would request Mr. Vinod Kumar, who is CEO Subex, to drive this discussion. And meanwhile, we have an poll also to make you more interaction and all. So, meanwhile, I request participants to post some questions using the Q&A section. So, over to you, sir.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you, Shashidhar. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's wonderful to have you all in this panel discussion, the primer for fraud management, taking on organized digital crime industry. As to my introduction, I'm Vinod Kumar. I'm the CEO at Subex Limited. Subex is a pioneer in digital trust and provides solutions to over 200 enterprise customers in about 90 countries. It's my privilege to moderate this panel discussion, and I thank DSCI for this opportunity. Now, digital crime is predicted to inflict damages totaling over $6 trillion US in 2021. Now, that is as per the Cybersecurity Ventures, who tracks these numbers regularly. Now, that translates to about 11.5 million US per minute. Now, if we were to measure this as a country, cybercrime or the digital crime would be the world's third largest economy after US and China. Now, is this a problem that only affects the large corporation and governments? Now, it might have started that way, but the widespread adoption of digital, both by the consumers and the enterprises, meant that just about everybody is affected by this menace. It doesn't distinguish between whether you are small or you are big. And the current pandemic, the global pandemic on account of this COVID, has put the whole digitization on steroid. And we have also seen a drastic increase in the kind of attacks. If adequate steps are not taken, it's not that far in the distant future that just about every personally identified information about individuals and enterprises will be there in the dark web used for heinous crimes. Now, these frauds, unfortunately, are perpetrated by organizations. They are large, they are very well run. Again, it's unfortunate, but it's true that these organizations have all the elements of a well-run institution. They have a clear purpose, they have adequate resources, they have loosely coupled extremely agile, the global reach, and even in the latest and the greatest technology. You'll be surprised to know that more than half of all the attacks happen not by somebody sitting on the desk or with a laptop. It happens by AI algorithm just about attacking every IP out there day and night. Not only that, these organizations have even evolved their business model. Now today, the SaaS has become the cornerstone for their operation. Crimeware as a service, infrastructure to host malware, hacking as a service, and whatnot. Now, when we bring all these to the Indian context, with all the massive digital push that we are doing as a nation, and also the geopolitical dynamics, has put a bullseye on our country and its businesses. Digital threats have started expanding beyond the normal realm of computers and smartphones, and it attacks just about anything with a digital heartbeat: people, infrastructure, power grids, and whatnot. So such an attack can create a major havoc and cripple the economy and destabilize the social economic dynamics that we have in our country. So clearly, digital fraud has become one of the largest man-made problems and is a major threat to humanity. So, as individuals and leaders, it's essential for us to have a holistic view of the emerging landscape and also the mitigation strategies. To discuss these, we have a fantastic panel of practitioners from a wide spectrum of industry. I'm pleased to introduce Anuj Bansali. Anuj heads trust and safety at Payphone. He oversees domain related to trust, identity, and safety, and security with a focus on reducing risk exposure from transactional fraud, anti-money laundering, application security, and identity theft. Prior to PhonePe, he worked at Flipkart as a product manager for trust and safety. He has also worked in Amazon, where he was involved in the Jungly payment, Kindle content operations, among other responsibility. Welcome, Anuj.
Thanks, Vinod.
We are also pleased to have Munawar Ahmed. Munawar is a consultant on fraud-related projects, including end-to-end advisory from verification, investigation, containment, root cause, and action plan to establish prevention mechanism. Formerly, he was the India head of Standard Chartered fraud risk management. He has extensive experience across consumer banking products and also strongly networked with an ecosystem with very close ties to industry forum, law enforcement, and regulators. Welcome, Munawar.
Thank you, Vinod.
We also is scheduled to have Vikram Kulkarni from Vodafone. He's having some technical difficulties to come on board. So as soon as he is on board, I will try to introduce him. Now, let's start with Anuj. Anuj, what are your thoughts on this digital fraud and its organized nature?
Sure, Vinod. So at PhonePe had the luxury to look at the consumer behavior, the merchant behavior, the fraudsters' behavior, right? Now let's go back a step. Why is it important around, right? Why do we require trust and safety? At the end of the day, right, as compared to probably 5 or 8 years or 10 years down the line, today India is on the cusp of a digital revolution. It's already breaking everyday records. Earlier, you had the limitations of if I wanted to transact, I would go to a nearby branch. Online transactions were limited across. Now, the mobile number itself has become the identity of a person. Everything you want to do is associated, it's there in your hand. You could do right from an ordering of food to booking a movie ticket to paying for your XYZ needs. I think that is all covered over here. So as more and more Indians at least start coming on the digital platform, the requirement for them to keep them safeguarded is very, very critical. At the end of the day, you have two ends of the spectrum. One is very highly qualified people, who are very tech savvy, the new generation that are so used to all the payment methodologies to everything. And on the other side, you have people who are new to these payment methodologies, and that is where the fraudsters actually try to, break this chain, try to scam them out, try to gain money out of it. Now, what has happened with the digital transactions also is that earlier what used to be your disorganized crime or even your organized crime that was limited to very other sets, right? From a laundering activity to all of these are offline. Now everything has become online. With a normal phone, and that's not even having a smartphone, you could still do frauds. Sitting in a place in a small village, you could actually end up minting money, which could be in crores. That is where the organized financial crime is coming in. When I talk about organized financial crime, I look at it from three different aspects. One is fin crime, which is effectively deceiving your users, your customers, your merchants. Second is the internal frauds, where let's say a company gets involved, either internally they defrauding the company or they've been used as a channel to defraud the company itself. Examples of that could be business email compromise. I think almost every organization that I have talked to, they've seen people sending out saying that, hey, I received an email from a CEO or CEOs in some meeting and they required an immediate transfer of funds. Now, all of that is because of the availability of this data, of the willingness of a fraudster, right? We always used to say where there's a will, there is a way. The fraudsters have taken that to heart. They find a way, and the upside for them is actually very, very huge. And the third last aspect on the financial crimes or the overall organized crime is towards the money laundering. With earlier, everything used to be a banking channel. Now there are multiple players in the ecosystem. So you could have from a normal transaction, which was a two-party system in case of, let's say, a cash. Today, a digital transaction could be a 7 to 8 party system where the money is moving through 8 different systems out. And that further complicates out. The bad actors, unfortunately, are good at utilizing these channels in terms of using that to, let's say, get the money out, to move money around. What I would like to focus around is on the financial crime in itself, primarily from a reason because that is what affects people like you and me. And by you and me, I mean as a normal person, not as, let's say, heading the trust and safety or looking at the frauds as a business agenda that we need to solve for. Earlier, you used to hear some that there was a highway robbery or there was something that happened to a distant area. Now it is becoming too common to figure out that somebody is trying to defraud me. Somebody is trying to give me a call, and I don't know how many times this has happened with my parents. With where somebody tries to call them up saying, "Hey, your connection is going to expire. You need to follow step A, B, C." And thankfully, have made them enough aware, so they just cut the call and say that they are not bothered with it. But a lot of people do fall for it. They end up sending money. The problem with this flow is at an individual level, the customers are the ones who get deeply impacted, from losing a few hundred rupees to maybe a few tens of thousands to a few lakh rupees of fraud that happens across. And if you look at the other side, it's a very well oiled machinery, right? These are people that are broken into groups. There are groups who would get your data. There are groups who would then do the calling activities. There are groups who will then convince you to send the money out. Then there will be groups whose bank accounts, etc., will get used out. And then there would be groups who would finally take that money out. And it's broken into a well compartmentalized chain. With the help of this chain, what they are trying to do is all these machinery is running and they are trying to defraud you. While you try to catch hold of one guy, there are like three others who have taken the money out, and by the time you reach out to them, the entire money chain has disappeared. And in this process, the digital economy does get hampered. People lose trust around on it, and that is where, as companies, as individuals, where we work around, our focus is to make sure that we make this a very safe place for people to come in and transact, where people have enough confidence that nothing should go wrong, right? It is a safe way to transact out. To put certain numbers around it, I think, and the reason I call this an organized financial crime and not just a couple of guys here and there, is you're looking at somewhere, anywhere, right, from a number, if I were to pick up, close to 2,000 to 5,000 crores a year. That is the number that you would look at where this money gets taken out. And all from a 100 rupees fraud to a 500 rupees fraud to a 50,000 fraud that happens. Now, for that to happen at this scale, it is well known that it will happen, and it cannot happen unless it is organized in nature. So I think as an industry, we need to come together. We need to solve for this in terms of making sure the consumers feel safer. And at the end of the day, it is either us losing it or the customers losing it. But the money goes out, the fraudsters go scot-free, and what we are trying to achieve, that goes for a toss, which is basically bringing in that financial literacy.
Okay, very interesting. I think it is true that the organized crime have started looking at all channels to convert and launder it, including, I understand, the Airbnb and Uber, where they have arrangements with the trips to launder the money. Anyway, so moving to Munawar. Munawar, you heard Anuj talking about the impact it have on the normal subscribers and the normal individuals. Now, from an awareness standpoint and how some of these things are play out, what is your thought on it? Because you have been at the forefront tackling these on a regular basis. So, what's your view on this, Matt?
This is very interesting. I tell you, most people look at controls in terms of the technical controls, the security controls, AI, machine learning, so on and so forth. The list goes on. But I don't know how many people actually pay the attention only towards awareness. I mean, I would actually translate that into common sense. Okay. Now, for example, you have most of the financial institutions sending mailers on, cautions on, not to shake credentials, OTPs, passwords, and, things like that. But then, even in spite of that, there are so many people who are vulnerable, knowingly vulnerable. They just still share things. Now, why that happens? That happens because of probably curiosity is one aspect, but the bigger aspect is greed, freebies. Especially in our ecosystem, anything free, you'll have the entire crowd jumping into it.
Yeah.
So people fall victim to it, and then there's nothing much anybody can do. Whatever controls you put in, whatever security measures you bring in, uh, awareness, I think, is an extremely important and a key aspect in mitigation. This is in one's hand. Unless the person realizes that nothing comes for free and nothing comes easy, I really don't think this aspect is going to stop. And okay, now in terms of some very basic practical steps, okay, you have certain online portals which register your devices every time you sign into them. And in case there's a new device, they send you an alert. Okay, that's something very interesting. But I think that has a huge scope to evolve,
Mhm.
because now it is just a caution mail or some kind of communication which comes in, but nobody blocks your sign in.
Mhm.
Sign in anyway goes on. But I think the next step would be to probably ponder and explore how that could be done, because for example, if there is a wishing case which happens, the guy sitting in one corner calls up a guy in another corner, and then because the system logged in is the fraudster system, and the
Mhm.
person is sitting in another corner. So if there is a mismatch, probably you can there can be some way of stopping the transaction. Now,
Yeah.
for example, if you look at the telco Airtel, they have brought out something interesting. Okay, every time, even if you share the OTP, before the funds get out of your account, you still have to consent it on the
Yeah.
app.
Yeah.
So that's something really interesting.
Yeah.
So all I would say is, see, most of the I think phishing is among the top three fraud which happens at least in India, and a significant fraud around the globe.
Mhm.
Now, stopping phishing, yes, this awareness, is something extremely important, I would say. Uh, it's just about trying to understand the practicality of what your interests are and how you can mitigate your losses. I think it just pure common sense is all I would say.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think that is very true. That we have two-factor authentication now. Probably I don't know, three, four. I don't know how many we need to go through. I guess that's a whole thing. The right balance of what need to be done so that it will be not so much of inconvenience with respect to the consumer that they will stop using some of these things. That's very interesting. And it's for the benefit of the audience. Now, you would have seen a lot of examples of the organized crime sitting in various part of the ecosystem coming together. It'll be good to have one example that lays this out, Anuj, for the benefit of everyone.
Sure. So I think that Jamtara series was something which people might have watched. So that was one epicenter of fraud that was prevalent. See, there are certain geographies, if you look at it, between West Bengal, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, and now recently between the Rajasthan Mewat area, where you are seeing a lot of these fraudsters operating from. So one thing that I had seen, and this is like a pretty long case. It was the first case that I was trying to crack out and just figure out how the money moved. So apparently, a few of the fraudsters were utilizing the wallet balance across, right, for different companies. I'm a part of certain Telegram channels, and I keep tracking around on this. So I got to know. So that just through curiosity led to the breaking. So apparently the entire group was broken into four parts. One was somebody who was collecting that entire data set, giving that this is X numbers who have a wallet and they have certain balance out. Then it was given to a Y set of users where they knew that, let's say, the account will get locked after three attempts of login,
Mhm.
and they would actually try to do multiple logins. It was happening across multiple different wallets out.
Mhm.
So they would just do under three attempts every single day. Once they have successfully cracked it, they would just share that to a third group. Now, this
Mhm.
third group would basically go ahead and then say that, hey, I can offer you a discount on the recharge that you want to do for a Vodafone or an Airtel or let's say your BSNL bill. at a 60% off or 50% off. What they were effectively doing is they were taking your number using a wallet of a person X and then trying to do the balance load out. And then these guys would actually receive the funds. These funds will go out. They will take the money out. This cut will get divided. The It was actually a kid who was running it, and he was not even over 18, right? When I caught up to him, I actually was able to triangulate and figure out where he lived from. He was around some 120 kilometers away from Bangalore. And he's like, please don't file complaint. My papa will catch me and beat me out. And it's A, the lure of easy money. B, it's probably a wrong company. And C, the availability of too many resources, right, over a dark web to any of these things, where you start seeing a lot of people trying to just say that, hey, can I game the system, and then getting towards the wrong side. So those are some one of those examples. The other example that we saw was around the same time last year was now see fraudsters in themselves are have an ingenuity which is like unparalleled, right? PM announced the COVID relief fund. And I think within a day of that announcing, the fraudsters ended up creating a lot of fake VPAs. It was the same VP at a different PSP handle, and they would say, just publicize it on a website or on a Facebook group or on a Telegram channel saying that, hey, donate here. And we just saw that, hey, there are only 2 or 3 actual authorized VPAs which came in. Why is there a sudden velocity which is happening around on that? And that led us to investigate, oh, people have started misusing. So we ended up banning them, reaching out to the respective banks, PSPs, as well as NPCI to make sure those get blocked. But in general, the way the money moves, right? I tracked the case very personally. I was trying to recover funds for some person who had lost like close to 93,000. And within a span, and this was a common OLX fraud. Somebody had posted something on the OLX, somebody called up saying that I will send you a QR to receive payment, which is never the case, right? They did scan, entered the UPI pin, and they said, no, this has failed, you have not received the money. They ended up losing quite a lot. And when we were trying to trace that money flow back, we saw the transaction happened at, let's say, 1 o'clock. By 1:15, the receiver bank had moved the money. So the person had moved the money from a bank A to a bank B. That bank B, by 1:30 or between 1:30 to 2 o'clock, that moved to 2 other banks. By 4:30, the money was withdrawn from one of the ATMs somewhere in the Mewat region. And by 6:30, it was withdrawn to another ATM in another region. So if you look at the anatomy of this fraud, right, it is the fraudster called from a number which was probably located in completely different region. It was somewhere near Delhi region. The money got withdrew. The money got transferred to, let's say, an account in a Bihar region. Then it moved to a Rajasthan, got withdrawn at both West Bengal and Rajasthan. And that is the reason I keep saying this is an organized crime. It is not about a single person trying to do all of this. It is a group of persons who are doing it. Often I have had talks with fraudsters, and it's like, sir, sorry, which number did you call for? Oh, this one was done by this person. We will get you to talk to that other person X. So yeah, so it is it's an interesting journey on how these guys have evolved. It becomes very, very tough because the identifiers you have, right? The login is still happening from the same device. The person is transferring it out, right? However much of an education and awareness we do, at the end of the day, the person has still done it. And so what I quantify this frauds, right? It's in 3 stages. One is the pre-transaction stage, where that is where you're trying to make people aware, where you're trying to educate customers, where you're trying to block them from creating accounts to doing a login. Then it's at the time of transaction. The problem is at the time of transaction, right? Everything is moved to a real-time flow. It's within that instant, the money gets debited from your account, gets transferred to another account with an instant settlement out. And so at that time, we try to assess, we try to block it out in real time, depending on machine learning algorithms to rules that we figure out in the fraud rates. The third stage is where the actual problem happens, which is if step 1 and 2 has still failed, what can you do in a post-transaction stage to, let's say, get this money? Other than today, probably blocking of some of these accounts, most of the industry actually fails to figure out a way to work to recover this money. And I think that is where we need to start working towards, so that people do not lose out their hard-earned money.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very right, and particularly with respect to these organizations, as established organization, we are probably suited to deal with organization that has clear structures. But these organizations are so loosely structured; they come together very well, executing things in the last mile, and they disintegrate and they assemble that together again. So it's quite a bit of challenging. I can understand what you're going through on a day-to-day basis. Munawar, as per the information reported to and tracked by the CERT, the number of cybersecurity incidents pertaining to digital bank reported in 2020 was close to 3 lakh. Now, what kind of measures and recalibration of fraud controls need to be done to account for this huge growth in the scale for financial crime and secure the customers?
Vinod, see, now if you look at the actual security incidents, IT security incidents, okay, now it is not necessarily that all these incidents are to do with financial crime. Now, these incidents, now, if I remember, there was, I think, the NCRB data or the RBI data, one of the two, they had quoted some 1.85 lakh security incidents in 2019-20. Okay, now if you actually come down to purely financial crime and cyber crime related to the banking sector or the finance sector, that is much lower in number. But nevertheless, in terms of growth, there has been a double fold growth, okay, over the last 1 year. That is, I'm talking about 2018-19 and 2019-20.
Mhm.
So I think from about some 71,000 reported incidents, it went up to some 1.8 lakh reported incidents.
Yeah.
But then when you come down to what is recorded purely as financial crime, that's a much lower number.
Mhm.
But now that is in terms of numbers. Now your question is basically in terms of mitigation,
The
right?
controls.
Mitigation and control. Now every now and then, as we see the fraud evolving, because I think the fraudsters are always one step
Ahead.
yeah, ahead than all of us. So, whatever, I mean, there are millions and millions of dollars which get into upgrades and new security systems and getting in new mitigations. But it will be really, very naive for me to say that you can have one mitigation or two sets of mitigation, which will take care of everything,
Mhm.
because this is a process which has to keep evolving.
Mhm.
Yes, in the current scenario, as and when we see a particular trend, I mean, whether it's global, whether it is, within a country, yes, there are certain upgrades, there are certain, security measures which come in. But at the same time, now what is not in control of, the organizations is the devices which people use. So
Mhm.
we do not know what has infected the devices or the devices have been hacked.
Mhm.
So to a large extent, if you look at the banking apps, yes, even if the device is hacked, there are certain encryptions and protocols which do not let the particular app, do not let the fraudster get into that particular app even if it opens. To
Mhm.
that extent, I think we are safe.
Mhm.
But I really cannot say that there can be one mitigation which will last for probably even a year.
Sure.
Looking at the trend now, probably every for 4 to 6 months, I think there has to be a new upgrade in terms of whatever controls we get. And okay,
Yeah.
now let me just say, okay, this aspect is very important to me. Probably, there's something which I would really wanted to share in a larger forum. Now, when we are talking about SaaS, okay, we have a lot of coding, we have a lot of rules, we have AI, we have stronger encryptions, we have machine learning, we have algorithms. I mean, the list never ends. In spite of all that, now what I think we are kind of slowly missing out is on that human intervention in terms of trying to get to the root of the case.
Mhm.
I strongly believe that with whatever advances have come into technology to contain frauds, that human touch is still extremely important.
Mhm.
Okay, for example, if you're picking up if you're trying to interview a fraudster, trying to investigate what is happening. Okay, by looking at his expressions, his eyes, his body language, probably the way the person answers the question, a machine cannot pick that up. I think
Right.
it is only a human being which can pick that up. So
Mhm.
I think that aspect is kind of getting diluted, but I would still say that's an important aspect along with the advance in technology, which will get us to some logical conclusion, and probably we can look at better mitigation in that respect.
Interesting, interesting. Well, at this point in time, maybe we will do a brief poll to look at what does the audience think about some of these issues. So, if we can bring up the poll. Um, so the question is that, in your views, which of the following fraud types is your organization more vulnerable to? Um, the option one is phishing, receipts of malicious link by the employees. Option two, fraud on the company by customers in collusion with an insider. Option three, insider fraud by an internal employee. Let's give 30 minutes just so that we can understand what is the how is the response coming in. Okay, so I think it clearly points to phishing being the most important issue. So Anuj, uh, now there is an adage that there is no point in taking a knife to a gunfight, right? So with that, in that adage is very relevant today, because on one end we are talking about a capability of some of these guys with the digital capability, which is AI bots and whatnot. And other end of the spectrum, we also have very sophisticated, very smooth talking phishing attacks, which is so natural. Um, from a tools and the resource standpoint towards address these aspects, what is your view on how we are prepared? So that's one question. The second is that while the investments into these has gone up, and it's got sort of linearly increasing year on year to counter on the mitigation strategies, the growth is exponential. So what do you think that what it will take for you to let's say wake up, or what will be a wake up call to some of the CXOs or the management to provide more budget and the support to this security and the fraud related aspects in it?
Sure, Vinod. So, see, there are two things. One is the willingness, and the second is the ability to resolve that. So let's counter the questions, and it happens at both internal at a company level as well as externally between at an ecosystem as well as a regulated level, right? Now, willingness is, do you really want to tackle the fraud? Now, and that is where I came back to the original point of why do we require trust and safety? At the end of the day, if the financial cost of this fraud is not towards the company, of course, the willingness for certain companies starts going down, right? Because sometimes it just becomes easier to earmark that as a percentage bips, which is going to fall for fraud, and you just agree with that and move forward. So, there has to be a willingness, because it is not just about you, it is not just about your company, it is not just about the consumers losing trust. At the end of the day, what seems like a very naive kind of an approach that, hey, it is not impacting me. If you look at the survey poll, right, 80% is saying that phishing receipt is a malicious link by an employee. Could be. It very soon will pivot to targeting the companies in itself. So at the end of the day, the willingness to solve a fraud has to come from both. A, you as an ecosystem hold the responsibility to have a very high bar for your customers and for your merchants out. B, as a company in itself, you will need to have a very high bar for making sure that nobody gets compromised, be it your consumers or your internal employees for that matter. So coming to the ability, now this becomes slightly complicated, primarily because, see, earlier there was the trail of things was very, very small, right? You would go into a bank, you would go to a telco partner, you would make a request, and that will get processed at a back end, and then that is how systems used to work. Today, everything is digital, everything is instantaneous. The amount of data that is getting generated, right? is huge. So
Mhm.
every day, without even having to do anything, you would end up generating terabytes to petabytes of data, right?
Mhm.
And for you to identify now, a fraud prevention cannot work. At least while India has a good 2FA process, but at the end of the day, you want the digital economy to grow, right? You cannot have a completely friction-led experience that, hey, I will allow you only after a 48 hours or 24 hours. So you want people as an instant this thing. So you will have to process through this reams and reams of data. Using that data generated, you will have to start generating intelligence. Basis on that intelligence, you will have to figure out what experience to give to what grade of customers. While 90% or 99% of customers need to have a seamless experience, maybe for that 1% you need to react, put in a certain restrictions out. The second part of the same problem, right? In terms of technology and infrastructure, A, you will require systems which are doing this at a large scale.
Mhm.
B, you do not have the luxury to say that I will wait till tomorrow and I will process today's data and then come back to you, give an option, right? You have to do all of this near real time, all of this data processing. So that is where it becomes tricky around in terms of infrastructure. If you look at the core FRM solution, the fraud risk management solutions, which different companies have been using, a lot of them were built for an age where it was appropriate for the physical channels, right?
Mhm.
Today, everything has become an online channel. For online channel, the way you want to tackle things is very, very different, and it that requires your ability to react, interject, and take an action in near real time.
Mhm.
And that would mean that a fraud, if it is happening right now, and if I'm able to understand that, how do I put in something which can go live within the next few minutes to an hour, rather than saying that I will take 7 days to understand this data, come back, and probably put a plan of action which will take me a month. And you cannot put a kill switch, right? You cannot turn off the services that, hey, all new logins stop, or all onboarding stop, or all transactions stop, because
Mhm.
the scale is just that high.
Mhm.
So the ability has to come by adopting the right set of technologies. While a lot of people do use AI, ML, I think they are still the guiding points, right? These are still your anomaly detections. These are things which will give you the anti-patterns out. That is where the human intelligence comes in. You need to have the right balance between both humans and systems, where you can take that balance call. And of course, the systems have to continuously running 24 by 7, because humans can't do it.
Mhm.
And we are very natural to miss some things.
Yeah.
So, I believe there has to be a long-term investment, just like you are doing. See, I like to follow a very simple analogy. I picked this up from somewhere. At the end of the day, your ability of a business to grow is akin to, let's say, your confidence of driving a Ferrari at, let's say, 200 miles an hour comes from the capability, that there are very good brakes. This risk system is actually the brake system. It is not an anti growth system. It is that your company's ability to grow will actually depend on how good your risk systems are. How good are you able to interject? Because that gives the business confidence that, hey, let us grow because your risk teams can take care of it. And I think just basis on that, the companies need to rightfully invest into this at both technology layer as well as at the people layer.
Absolutely. I think the control system is so key. Otherwise, you will go so fast and crash somewhere. Munawar, you had indicated awareness to be a very key aspect towards mitigation. So, what are some of the practical steps one can take in this direction?
Yeah, as I had mentioned earlier, see, in terms of practical steps, yes, definitely one practical step is common sense. Okay, without doubt. Okay, then other than that, which I have already mentioned, okay, we can always explore possibilities about trying to get the device registered, and any new login from a new device should actually be allowed with consent of probably the customer. So that's one thing which I which is something which just crossed my head. And secondly, now no, there is absolutely no mitigation for greed and curiosity and freebies which are offered. So you really can't look at a mitigation in that aspect. But then again, I think one very essentially one thing which stands out, and what in terms of systemic control can be done is, okay. Uh, See, now we do not know. Most of the IPs which are generated are dynamic IPs. Static IPs, yes, there is some kind of a control which can be put in. With dynamic IPs coming in, probably there can be a segmentation between a mobile login and a laptop login. Now, every time there's a laptop login, to an extent, probably the parameters on risk can be balanced off. But a mobile login, should be at that should be a red flag at a higher alert. And if it is a number which is a common IP across, if you have a IP database where normally these penetrations happen, and if that IP matches off or the MAC ID matches off, probably those IPs can be blocked, even not letting them go forward and clear the transaction. I mean, there is very little you can do in terms of trying to put in mitigant for awareness. But this is something which was top of my mind, which I just mentioned.
Sure. So I think there is an evolving area of subscriber behavioral analytics for some of these
Right.
aspects, which is in the cutting edge. So I guess we will see some of those things evolving and providing you some kind of cover, at least as some kind of data for you to ponder on. Anuj, there's a question from the floor. Can you give some examples of some new innovative fraud techniques that fraudsters are using, and what technology has PhonePe in place to thwart this?
Sure. So I'll give you two examples. One is with regards to a common application, right? I think all the IT industry uses it, something called as AnyDesk or a TeamViewer. Now, this is what fraudsters have started misusing to such a large extent. And they have become, let's say they call you up and say that, hey, I'm calling from your company and we want to support you, we want to convert it to full KYC to any of these ways, where they will ask you to install an app. Once they have that app, right, they will ask you to share the passcode. They gain access to your system, which could be from a mobile phone to any desktop to a laptop. Then they will keep you busy on the call. They might ask you to do a 1 rupee sample transaction, right? And you would also do it that, okay, it's a 1 rupee token, what can go wrong? What they are actually doing is they are looking at all the variables behind, they are checking that what can, they'll keep you busy on the call. They would end up then transferring your bank balance out because they've already, let's say, looked at what PIN code was there or what was the PIN entry that was done, or if a card OTP comes in, that gets auto-read. So what we have done at PhonePe is we run a runtime application security in terms of looking at device signals. So we have a device card technology which is built in-house. We look into any suspicious apps which are happening at the time of transaction. But at the time of transaction, then we detect that, hey, this is not a use case. Why would, let's say, somebody run AnyDesk to a TeamViewer and try to do a transaction out? And we then actively start blocking that out or show a warning to a customer that, hey, this is something which is running around. So that actually helped us mitigate out. The second one, which is an innovative one, while at a technology level that doesn't help because it goes out of an ecosystem, is the usage of technology platforms, something like a Google and a Facebook. Fraudsters have ended up creating a lot of fake websites, right? And then they would advertise the same on a Facebook ads or on a Google advertising, or they will send you a push notification through your browsers, right? Be it a UC browser to a Google Chrome browser. There are agencies that you can register and send it out to you. What they're doing it is basically they are saying that it's a one-page website with an intent saying that you have won something. And the moment you do that, it takes you to your payment screen, and it could be a PhonePe to a Google Pay to a Paytm, any of those. The moment you land over there, it just asks for you for a PIN, click to pay, or you have one reward, click to reward, and you enter your PIN and you lose money. Now, that is a very, very big innovation in terms of using technology from social engineering to going towards a mass fraud, right, of low value. There again, we have put in our systems to check and balance on what is the velocity of somebody receiving money from this, what is the success rates, what are the different users who have authorized these transactions, and we auto block some of these, most of these transactions from going through.
Okay. I think we have come to the end of the time for the session. There were a few questions. Unfortunately, we are not able to take that. I don't know whether there's an option for us to reply to that. But anyway, so I think from my standpoint, there are three key takeaways emerging out from this conversation. The first thing is that digital crime is growing. However, it is possible for us to mitigate it, but it needs immediate attention. Second is that collaboration among regulators, corporate players, both private and the public sectors, and the citizen is very key towards building the right level of digital trust, which will enable us to grow this digital economy and therefore the digital world. Third, to strike back the digital crime syndicates and secure our customers, financial institutions, payment apps, and many other ecosystem players, ISPs, telcos, all need to cut through in silos and work together. Now, I thank all the attendees and the fabulous panelists who participated in this session and for sharing some great insights. I also thank DSEI for the opportunity for this discussion. Hope all of you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you again. Stay safe and take care.
Thank you.